Good evening and welcome. The November 6, 2017 Board of Commissioners meeting is now in session. The Reverend Ronnie Culley has been kind enough to come and give us the invocation and pledge. If you could all rise.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we honor you for allowing us the great privilege of being in your presence tonight. And we thank you so much for the great love and the great protection and kindness that you show to us on a daily basis. And as this session of the County Commissioners meeting begins, Father God, we thank you for the great men and women that are chosen to serve you and serve this county. We ask you to continue to bless them, Father God, with your wisdom and your knowledge, that not only do they do their job as is expected, but that they do their job with joy and peace, Father God. Protect their families, protect them, Father God. Keep them encouraged in everything that they do to serve others and to serve you. And for the members of this great county, Father God, we thank you for how you look out for us and how you protect us and provide for us and meet our needs. Continue to keep us encouraged and empowered to be a blessing to one another and to be a blessing to you. We thank you for everything. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reverend Culley, thank you. You may be seated. First order of business this evening is approval of the agenda.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to public comment. Got quite a few folks here signed up for public comment this evening. Please understand your public comments are restricted to 3 minutes. The lights will tell you when you're getting close to your time and when your time is up. Please be respectful of others. We have quite a few folks signed up for public comment this evening. If you would be mindful of others, I'm sure there are some posing issues, sides on the issues that are at hand this evening. Please respect others. And with that, I will ask Ms. Doris Flora, if you can please come up and state your name and address. That would be great. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I have read an article not too long ago that was in the paper pertaining to the future plan that's being looked at for out to, 2040? And I saw that they were anticipating possibly putting out sidewalks on the highway there in Currituck Highway through Currituck. I will tell you that within the last 9 months, I have had 3 vehicles to go across my yard that came off the highway. We have 18-wheelers that are busting through there, motorcycles that go 100 miles an hour, and I'm not kidding, going down that road. I think that if we had a sidewalk down the main corridor, that it would be insufficient for what your needs are. I agree with the inner development divisions that have put in sidewalks. It's really great. Frank and I can walk, we can go over and we can walk through the back development and we can come out at the bank if we so desired. But the traffic that goes down that highway is unbearably fast and big. But I've had 3 that came across our yard, in the yard. Drunks are out there, speed is out there, and I think that consideration should be looked at very considerately if you intend to do something like that, because you're putting a lot of lives in danger. If you don't ride down there and don't live down there, you don't know it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flora. If I could call Don Huffnagel.
Okay, good evening. My name's Don Huffnagel, and I live at 403 Brant Road. What I want to address is the proposal for the driving restrictions that are being proposed for the 4x4 beach. We've gone over this again, and we're addressing this again. And what's concerning to me as a resident, a citizen, that I read a clause in your whereas the county ordinance may define, regulate, prohibit, or abate acts, omissions, or conditions detrimental to the health or welfare of its citizens and peace and dignity. I'm a citizen. I don't know who this ordinance is supposed to be protecting, and I'm not so sure who it's supposed to be making more safe to limit the driving in the summer, in the hottest time of the year, in the soft sand. It's going to create a lot more havoc than we can imagine. The people that get stuck in the sand or on the beach are exactly the people that are coming there from out of the state. It's not the people that live there. So when you force all that traffic to the foreshore, or not foreshore, to the sand, that's where you're going to have issues. Not only that, it's not stated in here, is it the whole beach? Is it I've heard 2 miles? We don't really know. So we're only hoping that before anything is solved or a decision is made, that there's an open discussion as to what we can do. I did go online and I got a petition signed, and I would like to present it to the committee so that you have it, if that's okay. And in that petition, we did some research, and we found that Residents Plus maintain are 16% of the people that signed the petition. 34% of the residents counted, 54 were from Corolla, and 50% of them were property owners that don't live there. So this myth about it's just us that don't want to restrict the driving in the soft sand for safety, from what I understand, we don't know the reason for it. We'd like to know. We would like to be part of a solution if there's something the committee is addressing that we're not aware of. But 50% of the people don't live there, don't want driving conditions. So I just hope that the committee looks at having some input from the people that live there, residents. And I think if whoever I can give this to, there's a lot of the comments and everything on there, what the people are saying. Yeah, and it's not just Corolla, it's everywhere. So I thank you for your time, and I really hope that you entertain thoughts of letting us be part of a solution at whatever you're trying to get at for the four-wheel drive beach access.
Thank you, Mr. Huffnagel. If I could call John Howland.
Hello, thank you. John Howland, 1619 Sandpiper, property owner. I'm also the president of the Northern Currituck Outer Banks Association, which is a nonprofit that's dedicated to preserving the Outer Banks. We have a letter that we sent you all via email that also is signed by the head of the Swan Beach Property Owners Association, the Fruitville Beach Property Owners Association, and the North Swan Beach Property Owners Association. I don't know if I should give you a copy of this. If you'd like. Okay, please. In general, we're concerned that we haven't been consulted, since many of us have lived up there for many years and we've got some good ideas, none of which are presented in your proposed ordinance change. It will be a disaster. I don't know if that's someone's intent, but you can't drive up on the high beach. People will be coming down ramps in the summer. People park their cars there. Boy, on the way down here, I'd have hit 4 of them. Groups of people parked up there on the dune line. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work. And then the wording of some of this is crazy. Like your 1062B, vehicles can obstruct this foreshore between Memorial Day and Labor Day, but no lawn chairs, coolers, fishing lines, or any other items can block it. But a vehicle can. It's kind of curious. I don't know. There's a couple other things in here about your ATV ordinance, restricting that from any homeowner, property owner getting 2 permits to no matter how many properties you own, you only get 2. Kind of interesting. Requiring that vehicles be fully licensed. Beach buggy's been there forever. Does that become a other recreational off-road vehicle I can get a permit for? I just think some more thought needs to put in this. I think we would like to be involved, the community, the homeowners associations, the people that have been here a long time, I'm sure the fire department. It's just not very well thought out. I hope you guys just table it today. Let us get involved. Think about it a little more. It's going to be a disaster the way you guys are looking at it right now, the way this is written right now. And I appreciate your giving us an opportunity to work with you, have the community work with you, the citizens work with you, to help make a better plan than this one. And I appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Howland. Denise Curie.
Yes, good evening. My name is Denise Corey. I am a property owner in North Swan Beach, 1971 Sandpiper Road. I am a sort of seasonal and part-time resident, but I am also a very involved member of our communities out there. I'm a volunteer with the local fire department. I am also vice president of the North Swan Beach Properties Association. I am here on behalf of the fire department. We guys sent you an email, so you should have received this letter electronically. And I am really going to read for you, because really this is a synopsis of all of our issues with this proposed ordinance. And strongly, the Currituck Beach Volunteer Fire and Rescue wants to go on record as opposing the proposed beach driving pattern changes. And as a provider of safety, here are the reasons that we are feeling this needs to be put back on the table with a little bit more thought into it. These changes will have a negative impact on our operations and will create hazards for visitors to our community. Operating emergency vehicles on the upper lanes will result in increased emergency response and or transport times. As a fire department and EMS provider, response times and getting patients to the proper care is integral. I know visitors that come out there, they worry about these things. How if I get hurt, how am I going to get out of here? These changes are going to make it much more difficult for us to do our jobs. It's also going to result in a higher maintenance cost for our vehicles. The wear and tear on these vehicles, and some of them up to, I don't know, Donnie, 60,000 pounds, going up and down those rutted, deep ruts, are just shortening the life of our equipment. The other things, the frequency of private operated vehicle fires is expected to increase. I mean, if you've been out on that beach in that soft sand on a hot summer day and people are driving with full air in their tires and they're bogging down in that sand and the transmission gets overheated and the vehicle catches on fire. We've seen it happen. This change is only going to increase that, and I don't see that as being a good thing. The congestion, as far as coming off the ramps, is very dangerous. I mean, when you're coming off those ramps, you're coming right into those lanes that you're proposing we drive in. There have only been 2 incidents where someone has been hurt driving that beach, and they've happened when people have come off into those high track lanes. We don't have any recorded vehicular incidents on that foreshore. So once again, we are putting people in that realm of an unsafe environment. The letter is yours. It says I have 2 minutes and 52 seconds left, so I guess I can keep talking. These are the things that we see as major issues. The safety of not only our residents, the wear and tear on our vehicles, the safety of the visitors to the Outer Banks, and our ability as a department to get people the help they need in a timely and efficient manner. Thank you. And I will leave the copy of this letter for you if you haven't received, but the department does want to go on record that this is not something that we believe is a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corey. Jane Overstreet.
Hello, my name is Jane Overstreet, and I'm a resident at 1677 Hilltop Road in Swan Beach. And I'm here actually representing Rufus Baldwin, who owns the property, Lot 1, Section 1, Block 1, whatever, right at the 17-mile marker on Swan Beach on the ocean front. And he could not be here tonight, unfortunately, and so he asked me to speak on his behalf and say that over the years he's lost a lot of property that was deeded to him in that lot 1, block 1, so forth, because of erosion. And he knows that that's an inevitable thing and that it, changes the property line. He has steadily worked to restore that property after storms, spends a lot of money and time and effort to sand fence it, to put Christmas trees out to catch the sand, to rebuild that dune line. And his legal property goes to the high water mark. And when you are asking for all the people to come up and down that beach to drive within 50 feet of the dune line, you are asking them to drive over his private property. He also owns a couple of other lots that are adjacent to his, and so you are asking him to allow every vehicle coming up and down that beach from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening to drive on his property, which will continue to erode the dune. Not only that, but the albatross is at milepost 17, and that is the primary entrance to all of Swan Beach. It changes with the weather, it changes with the wind, it changes with the water and the tides, but at this time and for the past several years, it's been a very steep ramp. And when you come up the ramp, you have to use speed to get up the ramp, and then when you're coming down, you have very little control over that speed. You're coming down soft sand. And so with vehicles coming perpendicular to you, it's like running a stop sign almost at full speed right into that lane of traffic. And because of the nature of the dune right there with this main road going into Swan Beach, you can't see to the left or the right until you're down in that lane. So that's all that we want to say on that part, is the property owners have a right to have their dune line and everything protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Overstreet. Debbie Davis.
Hello, my name is Debbie Davis. I am a full-time resident. I live in North Swan Beach, 2013 Seagull Road. What everyone's saying is completely correct. A couple things I want to emphasize on driving in the high sand. I am also part of the volunteer fire department. I'm a lieutenant there, and also training officer. And we also train our vehicles and go up and down that road. During training season, we will be traveling in the high track, which will make it very difficult for our vehicles, the wear and tear on them. Also, one of the commissioners here knows very well traveling in that deep sand and what it can do to your vehicle. He lost his vehicle to a fire. So he knows. He's seen it. People drive with air conditioning on. They drive with their windows up. They have fully inflated tires. The car's going to catch on fire. I've seen families stranded alongside the beach because their car caught on fire, because they're traveling in that high sand and in that deep sand. Our ambulance sits 11 inches off the ground. You put it in a deep rut, which our ruts get to probably 15 inches deep. Our ambulance won't be able to go through it. We will not be able to save lives. We will put people in jeopardy. We are here to serve. We are here to help the people. That's what the fire department's for. That's what the county medics are for. We're here to help people. You are going to cause a problem by putting us all in that upper track. The people who live and work out there, the people, Twitty, all the other rental property companies out there, you're going to make them travel on that upper track. The people coming to visit, you're putting them in the upper track again. These people come out in little sports SUV vehicles, all-wheel drive. They're going to get stuck. The only people I can see advantaging from this is the tow company. Are you going to be giving money to them is basically what you're going to be doing. And they are not cheap by any means. You're going to deter the tourism which brings the money to this community. We are out there to help and to serve and to make it a beautiful place for people to come and visit. I think the best thing remedy is a permit system. Limit the amount of people out there. Because now we have all these other communities that have gone to permit systems because of this same situation. Get a permit situation in there. You'll control the people who are coming out there. You won't have the day trippers coming out there as much because they're the ones who are causing some havoc. Think about the people who live out there. Think about the people we are trying to serve out there and the people who are trying to make money out there and live and survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. If I could call Donnie Tadlock.
My name's Donnie Tadlock. I'm the Assistant Fire Chief. They pretty well much covered everything that's going to happen. And I'm familiar with driving those trucks. The tanker weighs 52,000 pounds. And driving in the high track, it takes forever to get there. And right now we're driving in the high track half of the time. You're going to put them in there all the time. The ruts are going to get deeper. The cars are going to catch on fire. The ambulance ain't going to get down there. And we're just going to be stuck. I think the ideal situation for this is limit the traffic on the beach with a permit system. That's the problem now. There's too much traffic on that beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tadlock. If I could call Gary Smith.
Ladies and gentlemen of the commissioners, thank you for letting me have the opportunity to speak tonight. And I also want to thank, I spoke to a number of the commissioners today. I'm here to my issue is to talk about the beach driving in Corolla and the current proposal that's on the table to eliminate any driving from early in the morning till 7:30 and then the evening. But before I get too far, I do want to, everything that the previous speakers spoke about on the other issue, please add my name to that. I'm with you all the way on that. I probably drive up to Crow about 5 times a week, and driving up next to the dune would be an unmitigated disaster. But these people addressed that issue very well, so enough said about that. If pretty much everybody knows me, but I own Corolla Surf Shop and Corolla Surf School. We have been
We lost the speaker up here.
Lord works in mysterious ways. Did I do that? Okay, sorry about that. If we go into 2018, this will be our 22nd year of teaching surfing on the Outer Banks. I'm going to brag a little bit. We've been doing this for 22 years. We've been reviewed in the New York Times travel section. I think, Mr. Beaumont, you've taken a surf lesson with us? Yeah. Did we do okay?
Well, did well. Thank you. Okay. What I want to address is the impact that restricting us from being able to deliver surfboards, our first aid kit,
our drinking water, our tents that we use for shade, and not being able to deliver that equipment to the beach with the truck will probably pretty much keep us from doing the volume that we're doing. We teach about 1,500 students a year. We get about 25 boards up on the beach and all the equipment that's associated with that. And that's about 20% of our revenue. Now, I've talked with with a fair amount of many of the members on the board, and I know this is a complicated issue. I know Corolla Surf Shop is just a very small piece of this puzzle. I know that there are issues down between Pine Island and the Currituck Club. I know that some members of the board, for probably good reasons, have issues with chair and umbrella vendors going beyond the rules that we currently have out there. So I think there's voices on both sides of this issue. My recommendation would be Ben Woody and Jenny Turner did this last year. They had a meeting, and I think, Bob, you attended the meeting, of all the beach vendors as well as the county authorities. And we talked about this issue. It was a long, drawn-out conversation. But when the meeting was over, we came to an agreement that all of us have to have county permits, all of us have to have proof of insurance, all of us cannot be on the beach on certain hours and must restrict our driving. So if we can hold this and have a meeting and put everybody together in the same room, I think maybe we can work out a good alternative to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Michael Cherry.
Good evening. I'm Michael Cherry. I reside at 869 Corolla Drive. I would like to respectfully ask you to reconsider this approach on the agenda item related to beach ordinances. The impacts in Corolla to the seasonal business economy will be enormous, specifically related to Section 1063C1, equipment placement, what Gary was just talking about, and 10129B3, only allowing storage bins in ocean-adjacent PUDs. This will impact jobs, our local economy, and will literally create a first- and second-class citizen tourism experience. The proposed amendment punishes the entire whalehead community, Corolla Bay, the original Ocean Hill subdivision, Corolla Village, Ocean Sands sections A through C, and the Currituck Club. For example, Monterey Shores is not a PUD adjacent to the ocean, and their owners and guests use beach rental equipment companies to set up equipment for them at Bonita Street in Whalehead based on the current ordinance. It is a very popular and well-used service, and this new ordinance will eliminate their ability to have that service. The ability for county-based businesses to do beach equipment setups in the morning and take down equipment at the end of the day has become a vital service that our owners and guests in non-oceanfront PUDs have come to enjoy. This ordinance change will no longer allow that. I personally ask you to please pause and rethink this ordinance as written. What is currently in place is the most fair ordinance that represents all of Corolla and not just PUDs adjacent to the ocean. I would also like to ask you to consider to include in 10-129B3 that PUDs not adjacent to the ocean be approved to have storage boxes on the beach if the PUD owns property on the ocean front. This would allow the Currituck Club to continue to provide the same level of service its owners and guests have come to enjoy. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cherry. That currently is all I have signed up for public comment. Is there anyone else that would like to speak that did not sign up? Please come forward and state your name and address. Thank you.
My name is Casey Powell. I live at 206 Apple Court Drive in Nags Head. So I've grown up on the Outer Banks. I have gone up to the Corova Beach a lot for vacation, work up there. Everything everyone said is exactly how I feel. I can add on to the ecological impact, pushing people who don't know how to drive on the beach, don't really care about the beach or its impacts, pushing them up to the dune line that is already eroding is going to be bad for the dune grasses, vegetation, and like they were saying, the property owners. So I talked to the director of the beach driving safety for Daytona Beach, Ray, today. He's been in his position since 1984, and he says this is a big issue for all communities. He said that just won't work. They have their driving line on the shoreline, and parking is how we have it in the middle, and that there's been lots of argument how people should be pushed up onto the 50-foot for the dunes, and basically the maintenance that would be required, the breakdowns that they already have with just people driving on the shoreline is just too much. So I think it's confusing to me as why this is being done. If, again, as everyone else is saying, if there would be a discussion and for us just to know why this is happening, if there's a problem that you want fixed, or what exactly needs to be done, if we can help since we're out there all the time, that would be great. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening? Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I'm Brenda Howland. I'm at 1619 Sandpiper. And, of course, I agree with everything everybody else is saying. But I just want to point out one thing that no one has mentioned. And this last year, or this last summer, there were so many people there. I've never seen people there like this before. And these people have parked not only up at the high line, but they've been parking right in front of the ramps, the on and off ramps. And as we all know, it is not just about the fact of them not being able to safely come and go over the ramps. It's also about the fact that these fool people will back all the way up to the water, and then they fly like there is nothing going to stop them to get over that ramp because they don't know what they're doing. And they also come back onto the ocean side the same way. So if you got people parked right there or people trying to drive right there, that's an issue. Then there's the other thing. There's the horses. God bless them. They're wild. It is their place. But this last summer, they come over the dunes, and they're running full blast, and they're chasing each other. And, you know, they're either fighting or they're having fun. It doesn't matter. But they are. And if you're driving that high dune line, and I mean, I try to stay up there because of the fact that there are some crazy people there, and I try to stay away. But if you are not careful, those horses will just bound down right in front of you, and you have got to be careful. You've got to be aware the whole time. The other situation that I wanted to point out is people don't watch their children, and their children jump off the dune lines right down into the ruts of traffic. And it's like there's catastrophic problems that could result from this change. So that's basically all I had to say. Just please, please think about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howland. Yes, sir.
My name is Sam Wise. I'm a business owner in Currituck. We have one of the Wild Horse Tour companies, and I just wanted to go on record. Our company is in total support with what was stated here this evening. Again, I would make myself certainly available to sit down with any of you folks and try to work out a resolution. Again, tourism in Currituck County, of course, Corova Beach is one of the larger amounts of income that's generated for Currituck County. And I would hope that you allow us as business owners, respected citizens that live there, all become part of a resolution to what's trying to be done here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wise. Is there anyone else? Going once? With that, I will close the public comment section. Moving on, new business and ordinance of the Currituck County Board of Commissioners, amending sections 10-57, 10-62, 10-63, 10-64, and 10-129 of the Currituck County Code of Ordinances regulating driving and certain uses on the county's ocean beach. And with that, I will hand it over to Mr. McCree.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this ordinance is presented to you at the direction of the Board of Commissioners, and by way of background, it also follows a lengthy conversation that occurred during your last retreat in January about beach and beach driving issues, a recent work session. I know of at least one meeting between some board members, county staff, and representatives of the Corova Beach Fire Department to again discuss these issues and concerns, particularly with regard to the public safety and the continuing interaction in the summer of motor vehicles and pedestrians and those recreating on the county's beaches. This ordinance also, in addition, will make a modification, as you've heard some of the speakers mention, to the certain uses of the beach and the ability to use motor vehicles in the course of providing services to planned unit developments, and will make a modification to really a recent allowance in the Code of Ordinances that provided for and allowed for commercial vendors to actually drive upon the county's beaches in furtherance of their operations, which had not ever been allowed before in the county's ordinances until recently. But that will be a portion I'll go over that will be proposed for striking from the county's ordinance. We begin on page 1 of the proposed ordinance, and I'll point you to line 27 of page 1 entitled Registration Plates and Decal. There's a provision currently in the ordinance that allows north of the beach ramp to the county line for motor vehicles to be used or operated without the requirement that they be registered, inspected, or have current license plates under North Carolina law. What is proposed is that a modification or change to this ordinance that would require from the Dare County line north to the Virginia state line, all motor vehicles that are operated on the Currituck County beaches within that area, or all of Currituck County within that area, must be properly registered, have current license plates, and be inspected. The board has had some recent conversation also, and this is a piece of what is going to relate to a modification that will be coming to you in the Unified Development Ordinance related to the parking and storage of motor vehicles on vacant lots within some of the North Beach communities. Currently, there is a practice of persons parking and storing motor vehicles on vacant lots in some of the North Beach community in order for them to be able to come over from Knott's Island, for example, and then to access a motor vehicle and use it while they spend time on the Currituck Outer Banks. But that is inconsistent with what is allowed by our Unified Development Ordinance for the principal use of property, and it is also something that has contrary to the county's abandoned and nuisance car ordinance. And so in order to address that issue, county staff recently did a code enforcement sweep through some of the North Beach communities and began to cite property owners that were storing and parking motor vehicles on their property as a principal use of that property. Again, part of resolving that issue and presenting to this Board of Commissioners in the near future a text amendment that would allow for property to be used in that manner to allow for the continuation of parking motor vehicles. Part of that was this board's desire to ensure that if there are any motor vehicles that are going to be used, operated, and parked on properties in Currituck County, they have to be properly licensed, inspected, and registered under North Carolina motor vehicle law. Going on to page 2 of the proposed ordinance, section 10-62 of the ordinance, which relates to the regulation or prohibition of blocking the foreshore. The foreshore is a defined term in the county's long-existing ordinance, and that means the area from the water's edge to the wash line created by the last high tide, or otherwise we know it as the hard-packed part of the beach, hard-packed sand. Section A would be proposed to be amended. It still would prohibit someone from blocking the foreshore in a manner that would prohibit travel along the foreshore, the hard-packed sand adjacent to the water, except that particular prohibition on blocking the foreshore would not apply between 9 o'clock a.m. and 5 o'clock p.m. from Memorial Day to Labor Day in that area between the North Beach ramp and milepost 17. So beyond milepost 17, the ordinance that we all know and understand would continue to be effective, and there would be could be no blocking of the foreshore in such a way that would prohibit motor vehicle traffic along the foreshore or hard-packed sand. Paragraph B essentially remains the same as well, except for a similar or the same exception. All vehicles parked on the beach strand, and that again, beach strand is a defined term in our existing ordinance that means the dune line to the water's edge. The amendment would require that all vehicles parked on the beach strand shall be parked in the middle of the beach strand, which is just a shorter way of saying that which is already required. You're already required to park in the middle of the beach strand, such that vehicular traffic may pass without obstruction adjacent to the dune line and adjacent to the water's edge. So what we already have continues. You have to park in the middle of the beach strand, in the middle of the beach, in such a way that traffic can still proceed north and south along the dune line, the high beach, and north and south along the foreshore, the hard-packed sand, except between 9 and 5 from Memorial Day to Labor Day, in that area between the North Beach ramp and milepost 17. So again, similar to the prohibition on blocking the foreshore, once a person would reach from the North Beach ramp to milepost 17, from Memorial Day to Labor Day, 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, a person would be required to drive on the high beach. But once reaching milepost 17, the ordinance as it currently exists, and we all understand, continues to be in effect so that a person could divert to driving along the foreshore from milepost 17 to the state line or continue along the high beach at their choice. The ordinance provision goes on to provide that there should be no lawn chairs, coolers, fishing lines, or any other items blocking the foreshore in any manner that restricts public safety and emergency response vehicular movement in a north-south direction along the water's edge. So while between 9 and 5, Memorial Day to Labor Day, a person may safely from the North Beach ramp to milepost 17 recreate on the foreshore, the hard-packed sand beach area, they still must be aware and would not be allowed to block that foreshore area, the hard-packed sand area, in such a way that would prevent emergency vehicular response up and down the beach. I know a speaker mentioned something about that they believe that cars could be parked there and that might cause a problem, but again, there is no change on the requirement of where a car or motor vehicle may be parked. It must be parked in the middle of the beach strand. Section C is proposed as a new addition at line 20 on page 2, so that it would provide that no vehicle shall drive between the North Beach ramp and milepost 17 in the north or south direction between 9 o'clock a.m. and 5 o'clock p.m. from Memorial Day to Labor Day, except in an area bounded on the west by the toe of the dune line and extending westward to the middle of the beach strand. So, from Memorial Day to Labor Day, 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, from the North Beach ramp to milepost 17, a person would be required to drive their motor vehicle on the high beach, as we know it, up to milepost 17, and then beyond, as I said a moment ago, an individual will be allowed to continue to drive northward or southward on the high beach, or they could divert back down to the hard-packed sand or the foreshore. Now, had been some comment about a concern that public safety or emergency response vehicles would be required to travel down or only on the high beach during that time of year and during those hours of the day, and that might cause a delay in response time or increase wear and tear on those vehicles. There actually was some discussion when we met with the representatives from the Currituck Beach Fire Department, and I actually intended to add to this section the following language, and I would propose it to you for your consideration. This section should not apply to public safety and emergency response vehicles. And that then will cure, I think, that issue to the extent that emergency response and public safety vehicles will continue to be allowed to travel on the high beach or the hard-packed sand foreshore. Continuing on with the modifications to the ordinance, then we get into Section 10-63, restricted areas where motor vehicle driving is prohibited except under certain circumstances or exceptions. And I'll refer you to page 3, beginning at page 6, at line 6, page 3, line 6. Within subsection C of that section, you will see the strike-through in what was formerly paragraph 1. That would be proposed to be deleted or repealed. That is the most recent addition to the beach driving ordinance that allowed for the delivery and placement of recreational equipment on the county's beaches during certain times of the day by commercial vendors. So that would be proposed to strike that out again, trying to reduce, as the staff understands, the concerns regarding public safety and interaction of motor vehicles and public and pedestrian users of the beach, but also a continuing concern about whether it's appropriate for there to be commercial business operations to some extent on the county's beaches in light of some of the Unified Development Ordinance requirements. Going on down to line 26, this again is language that's already in the current ordinance that allows for the use of a motor vehicle within a particular PUD, but you will see here and in other places that relate to the allowance for continued use of motor vehicles within a PUD located adjacent to the Atlantic Ocean, we would add propose adding the words "or contractor," so that it would mean that the management of a planned unit development company or their contractor could bring a motor vehicle across the dune line between 6 o'clock a.m. and 7:30 a.m., use that motor vehicle to provide for services within that planned unit development from 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. and then remove the motor vehicle across the dune line between 5:30 p.m. and 7 o'clock p.m. That's the current language in the ordinance that we've experienced certainly through this past summer. Going on to page 4, beginning at line 1, again you'll see in this section related again to the Pine Island Plan Unit development, adding the words "or contractor." Likewise, going to line 12, related to the Village at Ocean Hill Plan Unit development, adding the words "or contractor." And then going on down to line 24, adding the same words "or contractor" relative to the Buck Island Planned Unit development. Then I'll refer you to page 5, line 3, section 10-64. This is a section that relates to permitting of all-terrain vehicles. The first proposed change to this part of the ordinance would be at line 7, where we expand what we mean by ATV, or actually off-road vehicles. For many years, since this was adopted, I believe in the late 90s, the language has remained that a moped, a motorcycle, or all-terrain vehicle is required to receive a permit before it may be operated or parked on the county's north beaches. But as we know, over the years, there have been a number of different types of off-road vehicles that have been created. So just to make clear and to help our staff that issues these ATV permits, as they're now known as, we would expand the definition of ATV and change it to ORV, or off-road vehicle, and designate those things which must have a permit to be operated or parked on the North Beach. That would continue to be a moped and a motorcycle, and then we add "or off-road vehicles, including but not limited to all-terrain vehicles, utility vehicle, recreational off-highway vehicle, multi-purpose off-highway utility vehicle, or other off-road vehicle," which then throughout the rest of this section is designated as ORV. Going down to line 15, then, we add that new term ORV so that county residents may continue to obtain a maximum of 2 permits for the operation of a moped, motorcycle, or ORV owned by them. This is to make clear what has been the staff's understanding, but these permits are to be issued for those types of vehicles that are actually owned by the permit applicant. And then the real change here would be the non-resident property owner acquisition of 2 annual permits for a moped, motorcycle, or ORV owned by them. In the last couple of years, that had been changed to allow a non-resident property owner to be eligible for 2 annual permits for each lot, tract, or parcel of land that they owned. But it seemed that might help reduce the number, and that's part of the intention here, is to reduce the number of permits that actually are issued, to reduce the number of permits issued, and also place a non-resident property owner on par with a county resident property owner, so that each is allowed to have 2 annual permits. There were some circumstances where it appeared that non-resident property owners were receiving and eligible for more ATV, or now off-road vehicle permits, than was a county resident. Line 25 on page 5, the change here is to delete the words "or being trailered." Currently, an individual that is operating, parking, or trailering an off-road vehicle on the county's beaches must have a permit to do that. This would propose striking the words "or being trailered" so that someone could acquire an ORV, for example, and take it to their home without having to first get a permit to take it to their home. But there still would be the requirement in any event, if someone trailers an ORV onto the county's beaches, They may not operate or park that vehicle on the county's beaches until such time as they have a permit. Continuing on then to page 6, line 13, section 129 is the section that regulates unattended property on the beach. It currently provides, or currently accepts from the prohibition on leaving unattended items overnight on the beach, lifeguard stands, or accessory uses regulated by the Currituck County Unified Development Ordinance. What is now proposed would be to strike accessory uses regulated by the Currituck County Unified Development Ordinance and add that this section does not apply to lifeguard stands or containers for storage of rental items intended for use on the beach strand if the containers meet each of these 4 requirements. They would have to be placed at the toe of the dune line. They could not exceed 4 feet in height, 4 feet in width, and 8 feet in length. They would have to be approved annually by a property owners association of a planned unit community adjacent to the Atlantic Ocean, or a planned unit community development that is the owner of a portion of the beach strand. And lastly, these containers do not contain or could not contain signage exceeding 8 square feet in size. So that ends the proposed amendments in this ordinance. I'd be glad to answer any questions from the board.
Thank you, Mr. McCree.
Mr. McCree, one quick question. This current changes that we're reading here and discussing, has this been put out for the citizens and all that to review these changes, or some of these being heard for the first time tonight?
Of course, there was posted in your agenda package an earlier version of this ordinance. I think I've indicated to you those some modifications that have been made since then. But those, which I think are probably minor in nature, have not been previously posted to the public.
Mr. McCree, would you just, one of the questions that was brought up was about driving at the toe of the dune line on people's property. Would you just kind of explain so that everybody understands what that means when we look at public trust areas and how that's looked at for the full drive beach?
Well, of course, in North Carolina, there's the concept of what's called the public trust area. While someone might have a deed that shows ownership of the beach to the high water mark, for example, the public still has a right to recreate upon and use that area under what's known as the public trust. In fact, the North Carolina Supreme Court has recently affirmed the legal principle that in North Carolina, the public has a right to access, cross, and be upon, recreate on that area of the beach from the toe of the dune to the water. So driving along the high beach in this instance at the toe of the dune does not would not, in my opinion, be violating anybody's property rights or trespassing, as we now understand the law to be in North Carolina.
As we're going through this, and I see Mr. Mark Thompson out there, and I was thinking about house moving. That wasn't specifically covered in here, but we see that happen from time to time. If we had to move a house up at low tide, and it was during 9 to 5, we can't do that basically now. Is that what we're looking at?
That's right. There would be no provision in the ordinance as proposed for that kind of exception.
Okay. I do have a couple comments just in general, basically brought about through people coming up to speak. You alluded to it or said something about it, but the Sheriff's Department was the one that really brought this forward, and they've been after it for a while, and it was in the interest of public safety that this came about. So while no one's been hit down on the beach, I can say how many times I've stopped my kid from being hit while he's sitting on the beach down there. And the greatest concentration of tourists, as most people, residents know, is going to be down in the Swan Beach area. They come up, they find the first spot they can stop, they stop, that's it. So this is really about public safety. It's not about inconveniencing anyone or causing any problems. The fire department was brought in. We had a discussion between the Sheriff's Department, the fire chief was here from Corova, and your president. And that's why this language came about, to make sure that you guys were able to operate your emergency vehicles on the foreshore. And as Mr. McCree pointed out, there is one change that needs to happen or clarified a little bit to make sure that emergency vehicles of any type can travel down the foreshore, especially fire trucks and ambulances. Part of the problems that were brought up were people getting stuck, tourists out there. As many of you know, we've added an air down ordinance. We're working with staff currently to get some areas for them to actually do that, and put air stations for them to put air back in their tires when they get off the beach, and better educate people. So that's just a couple things I wanted to hit on, that we are thinking about this. It didn't come out of the blue. I know it seems like it did, but it didn't. This has been around for a little while, and we've had several different meetings in it, including last year at our annual retreat. Should this become a bigger deal, if it gets passed tonight or at some future point and becomes a complete nightmare, we can repeal this pretty quickly, within 48 hours, just so that everyone understands that. And I think we would all be obviously willing to do that if it turns into a complete nightmare situation, again, if this does pass this evening. So, thank you.
Mr. McCree, page 1, where you have section 1057. I've noticed other areas you talk about insurance, but there's no word, even though it says current license plate inspection registered, it does not include insurance. That would be something I would think we'd like to add to that.
Well, let me just point out that under the North Carolina Motor Vehicle Act, liability insurance is required for a motor vehicle that is licensed and registered. So that would already be covered by the state law.
Right. You brought out another section about off-road vehicles. And in reading it, if I have a beach buggy that has never had a license plate on it, couldn't that be considered an off-road vehicle that I wouldn't have to have license plates on it?
Well, it's going to depend upon what the true definition is of so-called beach buggy. Now, if you look at some definitions, it indicates that a beach buggy or dune buggy is really nothing more than a modified motor vehicle, which would lead one to the conclusion that if it's nothing more than a modified motor vehicle, not truly an all-terrain vehicle or off-road vehicle as those are defined, then yes, it should be licensed, it seems, by the state of North Carolina.
I noticed also that, of course, you've got some notes here, and like you said, the page that we have in paper in front of us is not the same one as the one that we were sent out. So we've made some changes to it. And as the other commissioners have said, this isn't anything that's happened overnight. These are things that we've been working on continually. I feel like we're close, and we've made some modifications to it, and I'd rather see all those modifications spelled out before I move forward on it. I think we're that close. And I just don't think that, again, passing something where it is not written out concerns me. The other question I have is ramp grading. I heard this out there, and I've seen it myself going over these ramps. Is there anything allowed in the state law or any other camera or anything else that we can grade some of these ramps to where they're safer to go over?
I'm not aware of any such thing. And then, of course, that would raise an issue or question as whether the county has the authority to even do anything relative to the maintenance or repair of any ramps off of the beach.
And then I know we've talked about adding deputies, which should be a good thing, for the safety, without a doubt, to make sure that the foreshore is cleared. But again, there are some changes I've seen you made on yours. We've added to here. Are we ready to take and move forward with that without getting that final language in front of us and then where it's made out to the public? We're not going to make this, I think, effective till May 1st, I believe, or May 31st of next year, so we have a little bit of time. So I'm not sure if there's anybody else has any questions or anything in reference to these.
Maybe I can help. First of all, this ordinance as proposed, you can make it effective any date that you want, but as currently drafted and proposed, it would be effective immediately upon its adoption. I can quickly point out the few changes between the draft that was included in the agenda package and the draft that I've gone through tonight. and that is particularly on page 2, section 10-62, under blocking foreshore. The proposal was that between sunset and sunrise, that would be the time that you would be accepted from the provision of this ordinance. What appears now is 9 o'clock a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. And also what was then added in this section was from the North Beach ramp to milepost 17, whereas before it was the entire length of the beach. The other modification, of course, is what I mentioned during the presentation that was intended to be included, was to exempt from the beach driving section public safety and emergency response vehicles, so they would not be impacted. And then if you continue on to page 3, which is under 10-63, the restricted areas where you can drive unless accepted, that was the addition of the words "or contractor" to each of the planned unit development provisions. And then the only other change between the version that went out in your agenda package and tonight is in section 10-129 on page 6 of the proposed ordinance, added the language, or that is owner of a portion of the beach strand, so that it makes clear that a container can be placed on the county's beaches if it's approved annually by a Property Owners Association of a planned unit development adjacent to the Atlantic Ocean, or one that owns a portion of the beach strand. So those are the only changes between that which was in your agenda package Friday and tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. McCree, under the North Carolina transportation, what defines Highway 12 on the off-road area?
I think we've always heard people think that it's NC 12 extended, but I don't think that's correct. The closest thing that it may be is a public vehicular area as defined within the Motor Vehicle Act, but even that may be somewhat questionable. Just to point out, though, in case part of your intent of your question is where does the county get the authority to regulate driving on the beach? The county actually has an act of the General Assembly that was granted to it a good number of years ago, in 1985, in fact, that provides that the county may by ordinance regulate, restrict, and prohibit the use of dune or beach buggies, jeeps, motorcycles, cars, trucks, or any other form of power-driven vehicle specified by the county's governing board on the foreshore, beach strand, and barrier dune system. So that is part of the authority that under which you were able to enact and this Board of Commissioners has always enacted regulations regarding driving on the beach. And then sort of coming along with the North Carolina Supreme Court case I mentioned a little while ago that made it clear that in North Carolina the public has a right to use, cross, recreate upon the public's beaches from the toe of a dune to the water's edge. The General Assembly added, and this is the second recital on page 1 of the proposed ordinance, section 153A-145(3) of the North Carolina General Statutes, providing that a county may prohibit, regulate, abate acts, omissions, or conditions upon the state's ocean beaches, may regulate, restrict, or prohibit the placement, maintenance, location, or use of equipment, personal property, or debris upon the state's beaches, and may otherwise enforce any ordinance adopted or any other provision of law upon the state's ocean beaches located within the county's jurisdictional boundaries. So it's under those under the authority of those two acts, including 153A-121, that the county has the authority to enact this particular ordinance.
The second part of that is, this ordinance, and we're writing the language. For 7 years I've been on the board, and every single year we've visited this topic, and it's ongoing and will continue. My concern is most everybody has mentioned public safety. if we put something in place, we need to do a better job and do our due diligence prior to. We've discussed through the years since I've been on the board walkways over the dunes, signage, because the residents aren't the ones that are climbing over the dunes, jumping into the lane of traffic now. It's our tourists, and those are the ones that are, keeping our tax dollars low. But I'm concerned that we don't have some talk or some proposals on some signage, some proposed walkways over the dunes, and the county manager and I have had this discussion in years past, but I would like for some of that to be considered in your decisions when you're making a decision on these changes, because we need to look at that, and we need to put that into the forethought. Commissioner White mentioned the air down and air up. We put that in place without having the proper provisions in to air up and air down. So now we're crossing some issues there. So I just want us to approach this maybe at a later date, not this evening, but those considerations for some walkways, things like that, and better educate up to milepost 17 if we're implementing this.
I would think this would be an ongoing process. If we change anything, we've certainly got to get signage out there so people will know there has been a change.
Please keep your comments to yourself. Thank you.
And I think this whole thing is an ongoing process.
And to add to that, it seems to be one of the reasons we're dealing with this now, not in March or April or May, to allow us time to, if stuff surfaces. With respect to walkways, is that we kind of in the same thing with ramps? We don't really.
People use the ramps as a walkway.
Well, I understand that. I'm just asking from us from our county. Are we allowed to do that? That's what I was headed with.
Well,
it's a great idea.
There are a number of walkways that.
Ramps, but
right, I understand. Yeah, adjacent to the ramps.
Just like we do public access throughout the whole Outer Banks.
Right.
I mean, conceivably, there's some walkways that are shown on plats of record, but they are private. Those areas are privately owned. So of course, the county would need or want an easement if you were going to get into constructing walkways within those easement areas. I guess the concern about the ramp for motor vehicles is just to the extent that it might actually be part of a platted street or road, as shown on those plats, depending on how far it extends out. And of course, counties in North Carolina don't have the authority to expend public funds on streets or roads unless it's part of a service district for street maintenance. But those are some issues we could look at and try to work through as the board may desire.
There's a couple points that were brought up that I found to be interesting, and Mr. McCree's presentation that I think bear reviewing. One of them was referring to cars that are driving on the beach with fully inflated tires and then they get stuck. I know that we enacted last year an air down ordinance that we still had to tweak because there were some pressure questions that had to be answered. In the last report I heard, and let me say, there was a whole lot of pushback with requiring that vehicles be air down from the community, that it was going to cause problems here and there. And I think the last report, Commissioner White, that I heard from you was that the biggest complainer, or one of the biggest complainers over that ordinance that we passed, was actually from the towing companies because we were having less vehicles get stuck on the beach. And amazing, it actually works when it's used. So as far as somebody that's driving on the beach with fully inflated tires that gets stuck or has an issue, number one, law enforcement's going to have a conversation, and you can't force people to follow ordinances. However, you can certainly get their attention when they violate that. I do want to reiterate, and correct me, but we did have Corova Fire as part of this discussion, which led to some of that language. So we are being very sensitive to emergency response, and that in fact is tweaking some of the changes that we proposed, because we're very aware of the sensitivity of being able to get people on and off the beach. We're talking about kids misbehaving on the sand dunes. That is, again, that's an enforcement / an education issue. But, and I certainly have not spent as much time in Corova as probably most of you all have. But I can probably count on one hand the number of kids that I've seen in the sand dunes, but I can get 10 times that number of kids that are, as a father of a couple of kids and a couple of grandkids, as you get older, you start thinking like a kid. When kids see water, that's all they see. They don't see cars. Or when they're in the water, they see mom and dad. Again, they don't see cars. And, and it was with some very frank and honest conversations with our sheriff. We have been very blessed that we've not had a little kid get injured at the beach. It is, with the popularity, and again, as it was alluded out there, as the ability to drive on beaches has increased or reduced locally, it's forced that vehicular traffic onto our beaches. Part of what's driving us is, I don't want to wake up in the morning and find out that a little kid got run over because, somebody, and I will suggest to you, it's not the drivers, right? I don't, this is not necessarily going to be a driver's fault if a little kid goes streaking, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that, quickly runs from the beach to mom and dad and a vehicle can't stop in time. That winds up being a horrible memory, not only for the parents of the child, but that driver was doing what very well was supposed to be doing. So I'm not suggesting that even the driver's violating the law. And then finally, it comes down to enforcement, as it typically does. And, so we're going to have to be on our toes about enforcing it or enforcing the policies. And just like the air down, I also am not going to suggest that this is going to be perfect out the gate, but it's moving us, in my opinion, in the right direction. Lord knows, as Commissioner Gilbert mentioned, we've been talking about it for 7 years. Actually, not me personally. It's only been about 4 years for me. But, this is a living document. If something starts going south on this, we have every ability and every opportunity to change it really quickly. And, I'd like to point out, it's 9 to 5 for about 100 days. And it's only for, I don't know what the percentage of the beach driving it is, but a fairly, small portion of that beach that it's going to affect. So with that said, again, we had an in-depth discussion at our retreat. We had another work session where we went at it. I mean, if there's other questions, certainly signage, that's stuff that we can look at. But again, education and enforcement, and if there's still more questions as far as what this is supposed to look like, Lord knows we spent enough time talking about it. That's all.
A couple comments I'll just add to the driving section of this. I know some comments were made. I'm on the fire department as well, so the concern I had, I drive apparatus, is always access, how quickly you can get to a scene to assist, and I know the driving on the shoreline and the packed sand was important, and I know it's been addressed now, and that would have, I think that would have been an issue if that was not allowed. I think we addressed that. My wife and I used to go on that beach a long time ago, but the comment was made how crowded it is. Absolutely, it's really crowded. I don't like going down there in the summertime anymore because of that. I think a permitting system is probably something we should look towards to try to reduce. I think that's a good idea. And then maybe I'll take my wife for a ride again down there sometime. But the whole intent at the work session that the commissioners had was, we saw that the crowding of going on down there and the safety issues, can we try to create some kind of a safe zone for some of our tourists? You know, it started out with the whole beach, and we said, no, that's not the right thing to do because we have the citizens there that we don't need to make the whole beach. So we backed away from that. We looked at different areas, different sections of the beach, and then we looked at, well, we don't need to do it all year. Let's just try to do it at the peak of the tourism. Let's give a window of opportunity to try to create an area for the kids. You know, if the parents know this is an area where they can park and you don't have traffic, maybe they focus there and they don't drive all up down the beach, and it gives the children and people time just to go up off the ocean. And we're going to increase the law enforcement, so if a call comes out, they can start getting the beach clear and make sure kids and all that, so the emergency vehicles can get down to the beach lane. That was an issue we wanted to make sure, and I think that's part of why we're going to be looking at some more law enforcement to be there, especially during those time frames. So the whole intent of this was not to do anything with the citizens or the driving. It was just to try to work on something that, hey, can we add something to this to make it a little safer for our tourists, a better experience without worrying. And I've got a grandchild too that my daughter, they take their beach, or their children, or excuse me, my grandson to the beach there now, and they've made some comments to me about some of the driving on there. So, I mean, again, the whole intent was just a safe zone. It can be tweaked, modified. If it doesn't work, we can change something. But I think we need to start somewhere. Like Commissioner Beaumont says, this is this is a living document. It can be changed. Input. If something's not working, if we need to change the mileage, mile markers, whatever, we can do that. But I think the intent is good. Is it perfect? Nothing's ever perfect. But I think it's a good starting point. And that's the comments I wanted to make.
Any further comments? I've got a couple comments and address a couple of issues. I know folks have talked about the air down ordinance. We will have in place the locations and the ability to air up and air down before next season. We have had discussions of the locations on that. We've actually come across a little bit of grant money that will allow us to do some expansions along the Route 12 that will allow this to happen. I do have a question. Stopping at milepost 17, Mr. McCree, we are saying milepost 17, but are we talking exactly that point, or can we stop that point south of that access? That is at milepost 17.
Well, of course, the ordinance as proposed would make the area for the application of these driving provisions from the North Beach ramp to milepost 17. I mean, if you're asking if you can pull that back.
Well, the reason I'm asking is, where's the mile marker on that ramp? Is it on the south side of the ramp or the north side of the ramp?
Well, I suspect
it's on the south side of the ramp. So that ordinance would stop before that ramp, and signage would be placed appropriately. That may help ease some issues at that ramp. I know the ramp very well. I know that's an issue. Allowing the change for the fire departments, one thing that was mentioned was the ability to train their drivers. They'll be able to do that north of milepost 17. I think that takes care of that issue. We have addressed in previous meetings a permit system for parking. I believe that will be in place before next season, and what that will do is you'll be able to access the beach without a permit, but you won't be able to park on the beach without a permit. That's going to help with a lot of traffic. And again, this is a document. I know everyone has said it, but it is a document. We could sit here for 8 years and have these discussions, and it's never going to be perfect. No matter what you do, you could have 1,000 people in the room. No matter what you come up with, it is not going to be perfect. There's going to be unintended consequences and things that you do not foresee. We will be monitoring this situation. We have a commissioner that drives that beach every day, multiple times a day. We have people that work up there. We will be monitoring this situation. If this situation even remotely looks like it's getting out of hand, we will adjust it. We have 48 hours. We can change any ordinance that we have. So I can assure you we will be closely monitoring the situation. One reference was made to Daytona Beach. I've been to Daytona Beach. That beach is 10 times wider than what we have. You can drive on Daytona Beach for 500 feet across from the dune line to the ocean. It's no comparison whatsoever. Does our ordinance, someone had mentioned it precludes folks like Monterey Shores or Whalehead from having a chair or umbrella service. Do they have the ability to purchase property in those areas so that they may have an adjacent property so they can have storage boxes on the beach?
So certainly, again, because it would allow for any planned unit development that has ownership on the beach strand to be able to provide for containers, assuming they meet the other three requirements.
Okay. How long has the ordinance to be able to drive on the beach to deliver chairs and umbrellas been in place?
I was looking back at that a few minutes ago. The best I can tell from the history and from looking at the number of drafts that have been prepared, it appears to me it was May of this year.
No, I apologize. The ordinance, the beginning ordinance where you could take a vehicle onto the beach.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me
to provide those services.
To provide
chair and umbrella services, for instance. Ballpark would be fine. I don't need an exact date.
Of course, the Code of Ordinances provides a history section. It looks like that section was amended last on May 15th, 2017, and before that, July 7th, 2014. But I know there have been a number of different proposals that have been tossed around and considered over the years. So it's one of those two dates.
So really 2.5 years.
At the most. At the most.
So were those services being provided prior to that?
No, prior to that there was.
No, I mean, were chair and umbrella services being?
Certainly, and they were being provided and supplied from paved roads and the items carried across the dune line for the customer.
Okay. That is all of my questions.
Mr. McCray, I just need one clarification, please, if you could, on the storage units. So if any businesses or anybody currently right now has been having storage units out there for their business, this would eliminate that unless they owned property or adjacent. Is that correct?
Unless they can meet those four requirements. I guess in particular that the location of these containers are approved annually by a property owners association of a planned unit development community adjacent to the Atlantic Ocean, or that is a planned unit development association that is owner of a portion of the beach strand.
So prior to that, like for instance, Whalehead, they didn't have beach boxes out there prior to this, right? I mean, it was only within the planned unit developments with a homeowners association that really ran those, right?
Well, I guess prior to this, when the containers first came up, there were few and far between, and they seemed to be utilized by either some property owners in certain locations or maybe vendors to place the rental equipment in at the end of each day. And then, of course, the county adopted the unattended property on the beach ordinance that requires everything after a certain time of day to be removed or is going to be removed by the county. And we actually went through a couple different versions of the ordinance to try to accommodate or figure out how could these boxes maybe to some extent remain on the county beaches. And finally came, in fact, one of the earlier proposals was what you're considering tonight. But that was not adopted. Instead, it's the language that currently appears in the ordinance that they were viewed to be accessory uses that would be regulated by the county's Unified Development Ordinance. And that's how some of those containers have been allowed to remain for a while.
Any further questions for Mr. McCree? If I may, before I put out to the board for a motion, information for the audience, for an ordinance change, in order for it to pass this evening, it must be unanimous. If we have a majority this evening for it to pass, it will come to our next meeting and we'll need a simple majority, not a unanimous decision. And with that, I will open the floor for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we table this until our next meeting so that it can be publicized in.
Please keep your comments
so
down,
it can
please.
be
Thank you.
publicized with the corrections in print.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have 3 in favor. Opposed? No. Aye. 4 opposed. Motion does not pass. I'll open the floor for another motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve with staff bringing this back to us with the verbiage, as Mr. McCree said, for Section 10-62C. This section shall not apply to public safety and emergency response vehicles to address the fire department's concerns. And one other caveat to that, you stated that the traffic pattern would start at the ramp.
That's correct.
I would ask, if with the board's indulgence, that that start at the parking area. So when they move 1.5 miles up the beach to where they actually begin parking, that the traffic shift takes place there. The first 1.5 miles, there's nobody parking there, so it would facilitate vehicles moving up and down that 1.5 mile area.
Okay, so in Section 10-62, everywhere the words North Beach Ramp currently appear, that would be modified to say from a point 1.5 miles north of the North Beach Ramp.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Oh, sorry. Apologize.
One brief, and this is for Mr. McCree. If this comes before the board, when this comes before, if it doesn't pass unanimously, which I don't expect it to, when it comes back before the board, we would have, if the language was still not, if there was some issues with the language, that could still be tabled, correct? It's not a has to have an up or down, or does it?
No, it could still be tabled.
Okay.
I have a second on the floor. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We have 4 ayes. Opposed?
No.
No.
I'm sorry, we have 5 ayes and 2 noes. So the motion does not pass this evening. It will be brought before us at our next commissioner meeting.
To make clear, your motion did pass, but again, as the statute that you mentioned, because it was not unanimous, it will come back to you for another reading, at which time it may be adopted by simple majority.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'll take a 5-minute recess to allow people to filter in and out. Thank you. Okay, if I can, we are back in session. Next order of business, under new business, is amendment of the Wild Horse Management Agreement. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To provide a little bit of background and context for this item, prior to the 1990s, the Corolla Wild Horses truly were free and roamed the entire Outer Banks. As Corolla began to develop, we started to unfortunately experience a lot of horse vehicle interactions, a lot of horse human interaction, and the outcry was from the public to move the horses north of the Corolla area. as a standing rule, CAMA does not allow or permit permanent structures to be built eastward of the dune line. So when the county went to CAMA to get the permit to build the southern enclosure fence, the one that's there at the North Beach access ramp, one of the conditions of that permit was a requirement that a wild horse management plan be developed, and one was and has been in existence since the early 1990s. In the original plan and in several updates thereafter, there was references in the management plan regarding the herd size, and it was limited to a maximum head of 60. Over the last several years, that number has been part of a lot of conversation amongst several of the signatories of the Wild Horse Management Plan on whether 60 was an adequate amount or whether it should be something larger than 60. Some of the folks advocating for a larger number reference and rely on a veterinarian study that was done, I believe it was conducted by Texas A&M University, that talked to genetic viability of a herd and that you needed a minimum of 120 to 130 head to maintain genetic viability of the herd. And for the past several years, there has been ongoing conversations amongst the signatory of the plan about that number and about whether that was a proper number. Recently, the last holdout to that number was U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they presented to the advisory board a recommended change to the management plan that recognized a herd size of 130 in lieu of the historic 60, pending the undertaking of a full-blown biological environmental study that determined the carrying capacity of the area. So with that as a background, you have in your agenda tonight the Wild Horse Management Agreement, and I bring your attention to two sections. On page 23 of your agenda package, on action item 1K, there was a historic reference about the herd size that is being amended to reference now until recommendations from action item 1B, which is the conduction of a study, are finalized, allow for a growth of the herd size to 110 and no greater than 130 horses by maintaining and implementing a viable population control plan that includes but is not limited to adoptions, contraceptive methods, documentation, removal, and replacement of horses. And so we're asking that the plan be amended to include that language. There's also one other reference in the management plan that talks to herd size, and that would be on page 30 of your agenda package, where it specifically mentions the herd size of 60, and very similar language is asking to be inserted at that stage. The language being inserted says historically that the Wild Horse Management Agreement operated under an adoption plan with a targeted herd size of 60. However, until recommendations from action item 1B, which is again the carrying capacity study, are finalized, the Wild Horse Management Agreement will allow for growth of the herd size to 110 and no greater than 130 horses by maintaining and implementing a viable population control plan. This language is being, a proposed amendment is being submitted to all the signatories of the management plan. The Wild Horse Group has their next scheduled meeting at the end of November, November 30th, I believe. And so if the board, I'll be happy to answer any questions, but we're asking tonight that if the Board of Commissioners agree with the language amendments, that I be authorized to represent Currituck County at that meeting to sign off on the amendment to that management agreement. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon.
Mr. Scanlon, you said that you have vetted this with the organization, correct?
Yes, ma'am. This document, as being proposed, has been circulated with the Corolla Wild Horse Fund, which is a signatory, the county, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and the state of North Carolina.
Thank you.
Mr. Scanlon, just as a point of curiosity, not necessarily with the plan itself, but do we receive reporting of, for example, there's a line item in here, action item 1C, which is the introduction of the Shackelford ponies into the herd, and the cost associated with that. Do we receive anything that says how many Shackelford ponies were relocated to Corova and released?
It would be part of the minutes of that advisory board. The Corolla Wild Horse Fund is the entity that undertakes the actions. And as part of each one of our quarterly meetings, they present a study, or excuse me, an action plan of items that they have undertaken. To my knowledge, I think only one stallion has actually been introduced to the herd, and that was relatively recently.
Okay. And then the last herd size number had to do with an aerial count of, and I think the number came in right around 80.
It did. Historically they have conducted, I think 2 or 3 aerial counts, and they're talking about increasing that because although the last one, the number came in at 80, I think everybody on the board does not believe that that is actually the herd size. So we're developing a methodology that how to, over time, take these various different counts and extrapolate from that what we anticipate the herd size actually to be.
Okay.
But I think the number that is generally agreed upon is closer to the 110 number right now.
That's all I have.
Just one, excuse me, one question for the county manager. The concern I had was that the herd sizes now could be changed by one entity if they felt that it was the wrong count for some reason. But I think that's not a true statement. Am I correct? It's got to be a majority.
That is not. It would require a majority of the signatories of this plan to amend it. So, in the signatories is the Corolla Wild Horse Fund, the county, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and the state. So it would take, I guess, three of the 4 entities would have to agree for it to be a passing motion.
Any further questions for Mr. Scanlon?
Mr. Scanlon, I understand your reference, and with these 2 changes, I see the last thing it basically says it was updated 1/20/2015. So other than that, adding the 1 stallion since then, there has been no other changes?
Changes to the plan?
To the plan.
There's been no other changes to the plan.
Okay, I just want to make sure, okay.
Any further questions for Mr. Scanlon? With that, I'll open the floor for a motion.
It's just a simple motion to approve.
Yes, sir.
So moved.
I'd second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Did you vote no?
Correct.
Okay. I have 6 ayes and 1 no. Motion passes. Moving on to Commissioner's report. Mr. Hall?
Nothing at this time, sir.
Mr. White?
Nothing for me this evening, thank you.
Mr. Beaumont?
I think the only thing I'd like, and ask those that either are watching this or here in the audience that are people of faith. The tragedy yesterday in Texas could really happen anywhere, and I would just, we need to get on our faces because it's the slaughter of the month now, and I'm just, I'm shocked at what society is becoming or the increasing reports of this, and I would just ask, Mr. Commissioner, or Mr. Chairman, if you'd be in approval, I'd like to suggest a moment of silence in remembrance of the lives that were lost yesterday.
I am totally in approval for that.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Beaumont. Ms. Etheridge?
Yes, sir. The 4th Annual Senior Citizen Craft Fair will be held Saturday, November the 18th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's free admission. They will be having tables available for rent, and all the rent from the tables go to a Backpack for Kids program. They have hot dogs and chips and drinks for sale, And if you'd like more information or if you'd like to rent a table, please give them a call at 252-232-3505. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Etheridge.
Sorry to walk out in the middle. Thank y'all for everything. We won't be rude.
No problem. Thank you.
You're missing the party.
Ms. Gilbert?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. I want to follow up from the Albemarle Commission meeting from last month. I've placed this at each, or passed this to each one of you. This is a new report that's going to be coming out of the commission, just to kind of capture what all of the programs are doing at the commission. So I will be bringing these. I know it's the September report, but I want to draw your attention to the front of the page, middle section, under the senior nutrition, and this just kind of echoes what we've talked about in the past as far as home delivered meals and giving back to our seniors. If there are volunteers that want, have an hour a week even to help with some of the congregate and delivered meals, that would be much appreciated at the senior center. But this report is just more for you commissioners that I'll be bringing to you each month. Second, I want to piggyback on what Commissioner Etheridge said. Once you've left the senior center, you can go up to Moyock Elementary to the Women's Club from 10 to 3 on the 18th. They're having their annual bazaar, and there's a $3 admission and $2 if you bring food that will go towards the food pantries. One last thing that I just want to say is I want to thank all of the sponsors. Commissioner Payment and I sit on the Currituck Kids Board, and our annual Gobbler Jogger 5K run was this past Saturday. And with our sponsorships, we've raised close to $15,000 for that event to go back to the kids in Currituck County, and that's for purchasing books at the book fairs. It's for purchasing glasses for children that don't have insurance that need. There's all kinds of needs that Currituck Kids does. So I just wanted to reach out and just thank the sponsors and the participants for that opportunity for just making it a great event.
Mr. Payment?
Just real quickly regarding the fire departments, I know all the departments periodically do fundraiser events, and we should support them at all chances that we can. And again, if you can get involved with them and want to volunteer, I highly would like you to contact wherever you live and try to get involved in some capacity because they could use the help. This Saturday, Lower Currituck's having their annual turkey shoot fundraiser event. It's going to be fun if you get an opportunity to go down there. Meet the fire department, talk to the folks, have a good time. It's at the south end of the county, starts at 1 o'clock. You should see fire trucks and all sorts of good stuff going on down there. And that's it.
Will you hold the turkey still?
No, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add one, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
This Saturday will be Veterans Day, folks. And at 11 o'clock at Veterans Park, the American Legion will be holding an event to honor our veterans. Please come out and join us, folks. 11 o'clock, Veterans Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. A couple things for me. Most of the commissioners had the opportunity to go to a land use plan work session last week. This session lasted about 6 hours. I want to give a couple of words of thanks to the steering committee, who has spent almost 2 years working on this land use plan. They have opened 15 forums, had 7 workshops. They have had countless hours of bickering back and forth. They have reached over 30,000 Facebook folks, received 1,400 responses to surveys that they went through every single individual one. They have done an amazing job in getting this land use plan together and making it work for the county. The county staff did an amazing job during the presentation. The planning staff has been instrumental throughout this entire process. Again, the dedication that's gone into this has been truly remarkable. It was very informative. We learned an awful lot. And again, thank you all for that. I had the opportunity to participate in the annual toy run this Saturday. that started at the Welcome Center and ended at the Harley-Davidson store in Palace Point. With that charity, we were able to raise $7,200, and that goes directly to kids that would otherwise not have anything for Christmas. I want to thank Outer Banks Harley-Davidson. I want to thank the Outer Banks Hog Chapter. They donated $2,000 of that $7,200. There was a giant trailer full of toys. Sheriff Johnson has been supportive of this from the beginning, and all the staff with the Sheriff's Department has been instrumental in making this happen. They cleared the path all the way from the Welcome Center all the way to the Harley-Davidson store. And I really want to thank everyone for that. And it goes back to Currituck. This county continually amazes me. The spirit of giving to folks that don't have is a never-ending thing in this county. It makes me proud to be a part of this county, and I can't thank everyone enough for that. And I couldn't be more proud. Our Director of Elections, Rachel Raper, completed completed a course with the UNC School of Government in Chapel Hill. She was selected as a fellow. Out of 130 applicants, 50 positions were chosen. She's really distinguished herself as a leader, and I'd like to congratulate her for completing that course. I understand it was a very intensive program, and I'm sure that will greatly assist us in the upcoming election. So hats off to Rachel Raper. And as Mike Hall said, we're coming up on Veterans Day. A lot of people gave a lot for us to be sitting here. Find one, thank them, hug them, tell them you love them. That's all I have. With that, I'll go over to the county's manager's report.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
After all that, you got nothing?
Not sure if I should follow that. That was well said.
Thank you. Thank you. We do have further business. With that, I will call for a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. And with that, I will open a special meeting of the Tourism Development Authority and hand it over to Mr. Scanlon.
Mr. Chairman, you have two items on the agenda for tonight's consideration. I will cover the first, which are a couple of budget amendments, and Tamron Kugler will cover the bid item information. You have, I think, three budget amendments in your package for consideration. One is during the budget deliberations, the board approved a new videographer position. We wanted to bring that person on before we learned what equipment and supplies that they would need to support them. So you have a budget amendment so that we can move forward now buying the various different cameras and sound equipment to be able to support them in their in their actions. You have a budget amendment. We go through a workers' comp audit every year, so you have a budget amendment to adjust the budgeted amount to actual, and so you have a budget amendment so that we can move those funds forward. We did receive our flood insurance for the Wellhead Club, and so there's a budget amendment to increase that line item. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on any one of those budget amendments.
So the workers' comp, basically they did an audit and we ended up having more payroll. Is that?
Either more payroll, more volunteers, overtime. It's additional compensation over what they projected at the beginning of the year. And so it's an adjustment to actual.
Okay.
And that is an annual audit, correct?
That is correct. Yes, it's nothing unusual about that. In fact, you had a budget amendment as you're sitting as the county commissioner that had the same effect for the county departments.
Right.
Every year when I get this.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
We all do. Any further comments or questions for Mr. Scanlon? With that, I'll open the floor for a motion.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. And with that, I will call for a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
I apologize.
You've got one more item.
I'm sorry.
I'm prepared, too.
I'm sorry, Tamron.
That's okay.
Miss Kugler, I apologize.
Well, what I'd like to ask tonight is that you consider a bid award for a mobile performance stage. This was in our budget for this year to replace an aging mobile stage that we have. We sent out bids on October 2nd and also advertised in the Daily Advance. We got back 2 bids, and one company declined and said they couldn't meet our specifications. So on talking with our county attorney, Ike McCree, he told us that we did not, even though this was a formal bid, have to rebid it out because it was a product and not a service. So I'd like you to consider awarding this stage to Century Industries. The 2 bids that we got back was from Stage Line Mobile Stage at a cost of $112,800. Century Industries came back with a bid of $112,984. Now, the Century bid total is a little bit higher, but they were not only responsive and responsible. So they met all of our specifications, whereas Stage Line Mobile did not. The 2 major differences in the bid was that Century Industries stage is 8 feet longer than the Stage Line model, which we wanted. And the Stage Line model has an open back. We are looking at a performance stage that has a closed back, which would allow us to have more protection for our performers in inclement weather so that they'll be protected from rain in the event that it's just a brief rainy shower and we don't have to call the event. So I'd like for you to ask you to consider awarding this bid to Century Industries.
Thank you, Ms. Kugler.
Thank you.
Any questions? With that, open the floor for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Apologies, Ms. Kugler.
Motion for
Thank you all very
adjournment,
much.
I would now call for a motion to adjourn.
Has been.
Motion it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Have a good evening.